Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Welcome to another episode of Bump in the Road. The basic podcast is always free. We also have a premium subscription called Bump 2 that lets you listen in on extended behind-the-scenes conversations with our guests. Check it out at www.bumpintheroad.us. Conor Hogan, or Doc Conor as he's known, uses sports psychology as a life lens. What lessons can we take from sports? How do we become our best on the playing field and in life? Conor shares some of his wisdom from his book, The Gym Upstairs. Join us. Conor, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Pat. I'm very sincerely gracious. I'm over here in Ireland, and as we record, it's quite cold. And I know it's quite cold as we record over there, but it's quite difficult, obviously, when you're a different country and continent to be able to communicate, even though we have the internet, we have all these radio stations, which is wonderful. So I'm so delighted to be given the opportunity. My story goes back, and with regard to the nucleus of it and what I'm doing at the present, they're very much linked. And the reason being is when I was younger, I'm now in my early 40s, but when I was younger, growing up, obviously it was a different time, pre-internet days. I played a lot of sport. I was an outdoorsy type of kid, and I was brought everywhere, thankfully, by my parents with regard to sport. And I was quite talented. As I stand now, I'm 6'4", and a big, tall guy. I'm quite athletic, still keep fit. But back then, I played sport beyond my years with older guys. And even by the time of age 15, I was playing at the very top level. And so, I'd have 26, 20, 30-year-old guys you're playing with. And but underlying, there was a condition with me physically, which essentially I didn't know what was wrong. All I knew was I was getting all these aches and pains and picking up all of these different conditions and sicknesses and stuff. And it was just dragging me back. But I thought it was just growing pains because, I was tall and all of those things. And by my late teens then, essentially I was diagnosed with scoliosis, with spinal condition, where it's like the best way to describe it is think of a spiral staircase. Your spine is like that. And so essentially it's not straight, you're not elongated, you're actually twisted. Now, there's varying degrees of that. Some people can be born with it. For me, it was more than likely idiopathic, which means it just came along. Nobody knows why as such. Now, the operation for that, what they do is they try to put 2 steel rods down either side of your spine. And so you can imagine how the pain of even doing the operation and the recovery is for a lot of people. So if you're playing sport, obviously the disadvantage is, and I was playing a lot of contact sports, the disadvantage is that you don't have the same balance, you don't have the same strength with regard to your right side, your left side, and so on. And so if you're running and jumping and all of those different activities and actions, you're at a disadvantage, especially when you're bigger, because as they say, the bigger you are, the harder they fall. And so I was picking up all of these injuries, and I had to essentially put a dampener on it and stop in my late teens. And what happened then was, for me, I was filled with all of this energy and all of this ambition and all of this kind of wanting to improve, essentially that mindset. And even when I was growing up, before all of this happened, I was reading everything I could get my hands on. And like I said, with regard to the internet, it wasn't really, it wasn't there at the moment. So I was buying books here, there, and everywhere. Then when the internet came along in my late teens, it kind of coincided with that time frame where I had to stop. And so I was just reading up on how I could improve myself physically. Obviously, I went to the common and traditional medical route, and I was told by a specialist that essentially I was inoperable here in Europe. And so I had to go a different route. I had to seek what was called alternative medicine at the time. And now many of the therapies and places I went are now considered complementary therapy. And a bit of research actually I done during the pandemic with regard to it all was a lot of people said that they don't care where it comes from. Once it's therapy, once it works, right? Whether it's complementary or medical. So I went down that route, like in my own personal life. And at the same time, professionally, I was becoming a teacher. So I thought in all aspects of high school, elementary school. And then I found myself into behavioral difficulties schools, where there was a lot of very unique problems with children, from suicidal ideation to anxiety disorders, depression, problems at home, social problems, coming from split families, all of those things, a lot of anger and disruption in the life of the child. And so I was doing that, as well as then overcoming, thankfully, my physical problems and my linkages with sport. And by the way, the other thing was, when we were growing up, we had a family golf course. So there's a lot of linkages of sport there. And that's where my book then is set in the context, my book, The Gym Upstairs, with regard to professional sport, because I ended up working then with all my my degrees and everything, because essentially what I promised myself was, hey, I'm going to get myself out of this hole with regard to my physical problems. And when I do, I'm going to learn everything I learn. I'm going to study it, and then I'm going to be able to help others. It's that simple, because I think if you've experienced it, and here we are with this fantastic podcast, The Bump in the Road. If you've had the bump in the road, no better way, I think, than actually use what you know best and help others in that regard. So that's what I'm trying to do right now.
That had to be incredibly difficult as a young person to go through being dislocated from everything you were doing. I mean, it had to be isolating.
Well, it was, and what I did was, it's funny, and to prove, and I think if anybody's listening with regard to any aspect of life, it's not just, physical health. It could be money, it could be lack of income, it could be with regard to anything, relationships, and you're wondering why you're outside of the loop, if you're isolated. The reality is, though, you can only do what you can do. You can only control the situation in between your own two ears. Everything else, though, around that, your external, will change, so long as you know exactly what you want. You might know how to get there, but if you know what you want, you'll find a way. You sincerely will. And that's where you'll be attracted to certain people, personalities. And now with the internet, learning, and like, for example, us two, we wouldn't be interested in each other's in connecting, other than I could perhaps give value in this regard. And obviously, your particular podcast links in with things I do. So I think that's where this hopefully is going to be a great conversation for the listeners. But for sure, if it's isolated, though, there are people. And again, going back to the internet, there's people out there, like, we've got to realize there's 8 billion people in the world right now. So whatever you're suffering from, or whatever you're going through, be it economically or relationship wise, I bet there's somebody else out there that has that. And if they don't, you can put it up out there, and you'll be surprised people that will get in touch. And but at the time, you're right, it was isolating insofar as I didn't know where to put my energies and where to put everything. So I started doing a lot of charity work, believe it or not, and essentially kind of putting all my energies into that. And I realized, too, the time that you put into something like sport and the commitment you put into that, when that's taken away from you, you have a lot of time. And so, yeah, you're right. When you're on your own, you have that vital decision to make, essentially. Will I continue to try and improve and put it into other aspects of life? Or will I continue, or will I just crumble? Will I take this as not just a bump in the road, but just as being the road ahead?
And I think a lot of people face that in a lot of ways. And I think it's okay to crumble for a bit, but you eventually have to pull yourself together again. What do you think are some of the mental traits that are helpful in terms of pulling yourself up and getting moving?
Well, I would say, and I agree with you there. I mean, it's only human nature to be stopped, like deers in the headlights. You just stopped, and it's like, whoa, hold on a second. This is not my plan. This was not what I've worked for or where I want to go. And suddenly you're caught. You're in no man's land. And I think if you take that time, obviously you're going to be shocked, or, things have to be redirected. But like you said, if you still have that fire, if you still have that passion, if you still have that drive, if you still think bigger, look longer, look vaster, dream, allow yourself to dream. Take that time to recalibrate, to be able to go, okay, look, this is what I was trying to do, but I can't do it anymore. So what did I put into that? Okay, yeah, you'll get hung up on all the time and the effort and the energy and the money and all that you've done to go into that particular thing. But that's gone now. So you're still alive. So what else did you put into it? Ask yourself that. And you realize that, there's things that you're really good at, like perhaps your persistence, your attitude, your determination, your confidence in going forward with that particular thing until you got that roadblock. So use those things, those attributes in your next venture, in your next thing that you're doing. Allow that to be the very strong gauge of your internal personality as such, because you've had the bump in the road. So what? I mean, you're still here. You still have life. You still have energy. You can still do something. So dream big, and go for it after that. And know that those things, even though physically or relationship wise or money or whatever else, these things or people have gone away from you, you still have the core, and the core has been tested. And guess what? You survived. So that means you're there for a bigger journey, I think.
One of the things you just mentioned and you talk about in your book is the importance of having what you call a good personality in terms of success, particularly in sports, but in life as well. What makes up a good personality?
Yeah, well, I don't want to be very elitist and trying to push people off with regard to you have a bad personality if I mention certain attributes. But I mean, the reality is, if we're trying to achieve anything, and the book is set in the context of sport, but it's transferable to business, again, to relationships, to anything you want to achieve, to high performers, essentially. And if you're not a high performer right now, it's okay. You can become that. But you need certain habits, right? And all of the research I've done over the years, it lends to this. Essentially, let's take it like a 24/7 type of thing, a day. So if we go to a day, you got to get up early. Why? Well, there's scientific proof with regard to getting up earlier and doing certain things in the morning time that set you up for a day. And then that routine can be continued and duplicated each and every day. Second thing is, with regard to like Monday to Friday, why do you have to do Monday to Friday? You can do Saturday and Sunday too. If you find something that you have to also have a goal with regard to the big goal, right? And I'm not just talking about like achieving a yearly thing. I'm talking about a lifetime thing. For example, one of the people that I interviewed recently, he has a huge drive in order to conquer the legal world and build a community in honor of his grandfather, who motivated himself in the first place to become a lawyer. And that's a huge drive. This guy is like not even 40 years of age. And so that's a big thing. So that's a lot of other skills you've got to learn. So if you get up early and you do those things and back yourself, never be afraid to invest in yourself in every way with regard to money, with regard to anything, you're supercharging yourself, right? The people that are around you right now, it's a big thing as well. I think you have to start realizing and figuring out why you're with these people or around these people. If it's geographic, well, do you need to be there? Can you actually like not hang around with the people on the street down the road, instead hang around with people on the street up the road? I mean, what can you give to them but also get from them? And I don't mean that in a short-term sense about getting or trying to be a people climber. I mean, like, who are your people that like really fit in with your thought process in the long term? Because even if you're not getting there, if you're not there already to whatever aim you want to be at, certainly the people that are in the same sphere of what you're interested in will actually want to be around people like you, because they'll see you as a junior, perhaps a person they can mentor or anything like that, because essentially they want to be into people that are into things like they're into, right? So never be afraid to think big. I mean, look at all these people. If we look at money, for example, billionaires. I mean, imagine being a billionaire. That's crazy when you think about it. But these people have to come from somewhere. And so, like, you'll find that a lot of these people are quite normal. They do everyday things. They still have 24 hours in the day, 7 days a week. So it's how you organize yourself, the people you're around, the podcasts like this one that you listen to, and listen to and if you're listening, for example, in months or years' time to this one, it's still the same thing. The research is there. I'm just, the work I've done is just building on blocks of other research that has been done for decades. So it's essentially, what you're doing and how you're doing and how you're spending your time, who you're spending your time with. That will give you your greatest chance to succeed as a higher performer.
Yeah, I think the people you surround yourself with is incredibly important. And that may change over time as you evolve, which means leaving a tribe sometimes. And that can be very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is with regard to that, and that can be very awkward.
Yeah.
Let's not kind of dampen it down and say, hey, all right, it's not like, just leaving school where you kind of have an excuse and you can go, I'm going over here, I'm going to college, or I'm going to a different city. Therefore, it's not that I don't want to talk to you. It's just that, I'm graduating. That's the word, isn't it? But the reality is we might have really close relationships, such as family members, that we can't get, an awful thing to say, but we can't get rid of them. But take it like this, right? We all come from a family in some regard, maybe smaller or bigger. And the thing about it is, I always believe that the people in your family, as we all know, they're not always the same personality as you. They don't go through the exact same experiences, even though you might have been in the same household growing up and that. Everybody has their own thing and everybody has a different kind of quirkiness or genetic composition. Slightly different can be hugely different in a family, as we know. But the thing about it is, these are people that are challenging you, right? So they're challenging you. And if you go out in the big bad world, no matter what you're doing, like I said, go to a different tribe of people, you still will be challenged. There will still be a person there that will irritate you, that you might kind of go, I find them out. They're not really genuine, even though I'm in a really good bunch of people here. You'll always have people that will challenge you. If you're bullied or felt bullied as a young person, that's a horrible thing. However, there's always bullies in every walk of life. So you have to continue to develop yourself and look at yourself, like I said at the beginning. Always, look at how you can react to things in this present situation, because just because, say, it's a bully that you find yourself in, and you're in this new tribe of people, and it's the ideal place for you to grow economically, or in sporting context or relationship or whatever else, you still have the chance to react differently, and that's a sign of your growth with regard to the last time, for example, that you faced somebody like that.
I think choosing your reactions is one of the most meaningful things you can do. But to do that, you have to be able to pause and not be reactive, actually.
Yeah, and that's a really good word, reactive. And again, the research I've done has proven that, like, the highest performance, and if we think of sport is a really good context, because sport happens fast. Okay, it's split seconds. The ball is there and then it's gone, right? And then for years after, athletes regret and they have nightmares, even if it's a bigger competitive field or a final that they'll never play in again. And so you may only have one chance in this life to meet one person or to react in the way that you should act. And it's about controlling your emotions with regard to that. And the great thing about that is, again, if you're listening right now and you don't know the road ahead, but you have an idea where you want to go, you definitely will be challenged by different people in the future. So now is the time. And you mentioned isolation. I kind of always look at isolation like two sides of the one coin, right? So you can choose to be isolated, or you can choose to actually spend the time alone. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. So we have, and we spoke about this before off air, right, with regard to all of the distractions nowadays that are out there. Like, there's so much to educate us online, televisions, multi-channel, etc. But these can be a distraction from our own sense of self. So we really have to get to the bottom before we can kind of get to the top. And the bottom is within ourselves, and the top is also within ourselves. Because even if you don't, say, for example, you're trying to make money, people will notice you if you're doing the right thing, if you're consistent, persistent, if you're determined, if you're focused, if you're interested. You'll have some sort of knowledge to give to somebody, say, for example, who has a lot of money. So there's always a way, but it starts and ends with you. So you have to be able to control your emotions. Even if you have failed in the past, if somebody has, just flicked your switch, we all have switches, but you have to be able to kind of forgive yourself and move on, but control your emotions with regard to do the work on yourself right now, and it'll help you for the rest of your life.
I think turning within and figuring out what makes you tick and being true to yourself will set you on the path you're meant to be on, and things will fall your way over time. I think being true to yourself is so important. And I think that, as we were talking about distractions in society, people are so constantly bombarded with things, they're just not taking the time to be still. And there's so much value in stillness.
I mean, we could have 10 conversations about stillness alone. I completely agree with you. I mean, look at nature. Look at the difference. Let's put it like this. We're probably roughly about 25 years into this whole internet thing. For the most part, it's been really entertaining, hugely educational. But as we now know, there's also downsides too. Let's now look at nature and the millions or even billions of years that nature has been around. You mentioned stillness. The first thing that comes to mind is water, right? One of the vital elements of nature. And we know with adverse weather conditions, extreme cold, heat, wind, storms, tornadoes, whatever else, that water can do whatever it's taken to do by the other elements of nature. But when you sit by water that's calm and still, there's nothing as fulfilling. And literally, we have to be like, look at the external world, that it can just, toss us around like that. Water can create waves and whatever else. But our essence, our real true self, is that stillness. So we find that stillness, come up with a plan, and don't be afraid to reach out, even to me, right? Even if you just need a suggestion or a redirection, that's cool. I'm always open to that. But finding your people, like you said, and the places where you want to go, it's not always that easy. But certainly find your stillness first. And then from there, it will be a roller coaster, but you can always go back to your stillness. And that's the great thing to say about meditation and all of the things that have been done and are very scientifically proven for thousands of years with huge populations, is that if you can find that inner self and that time of complete contentness, that's where consciousness truly comes from. That's when you begin to notice things that others are not noticing. That's why the words like innovation and creation are so vital in this world, in sport, in business, in relationships, in everything, in healthcare. Look what happened in the last couple of years with regard to healthcare and the stumbling blocks. But people innovated, and they saw, and they realized and focused on the problem and got the solution.
Now, meditation is one of my favorite topics. I came across meditation a little bit later in life, and it has been an absolute game changer.
Yeah.
How can somebody approach it? I know so many people say, I can't be still, my mind is too busy. Give people some hints for how to approach meditation and what can it do for their lives?
Yeah, I mean, first off, there is a lot of information out there. I mean, there was a buzzword that came out there a couple of years ago, and it was just incredible. Um, with regard to, awareness was one, right? Mindfulness was huge. It was absolutely huge there for a few years. But meditation, like you said, is around for thousands and thousands of years. Now often people just go, hey, you got to sit a certain way. I can't sit that way. My legs can't do it. So therefore I can't meditate. I'm out. That's it. Cool. I'm out. But that's just an excuse, right? We can sit in a chair. The whole purpose of that funny way of cross-legged sitting, for example, is just to get the spine erect in order to be able to make sure that the body is not doing other things. It's not like shaking a leg if you're sitting. It's about just being stable and giving a functional fulcrum, such to locking in the spine and sitting straight. The main thing about having the spine straight, and the reason behind it, is because our brain is connected through our nervous system via our central nervous system via our spine. So we have all these different vertebrae, these little bones in our backs, and they're all connected up with all these nerve endings, which then connect up with our senses in what we hear, see, touch, feel, and so on. And also with regard to our movement, like, again, shaking leg, toes, if you're sitting bored or kind of, listening to something is like boring, it's like you're twitching, whatever else. So what we need to do is just make the body dormant, come to a place where it's completely still. And then the mind, via the brain, will then also just completely go into a different brain state, right? A completely different medically proven state of completely different brainwaves, right? Now, can that be done at any time of the day? Yes, it can. However, it's more favorable and more ideally in the long term and for sustainability of the benefits that I'll mention in a second that you'll get, is to do it in the morning and to train and practice at it in the morning. So what is the benefits then in the short and long term? You won't change. The world around you won't change. Okay, the external stuff, it just won't. Okay, if there's a recession, there's a recession. It'll take however long it will take. If there's a problem in your job and your boss is not good, you can't change him. However, you will definitely change yourself. And the reason being is because if you can get yourself in that brain state consistently at a vital time in the morning when all these thousands of thoughts, good and bad, and many of them are just negative, and most of them are, what if this happens? What will I do? And so there's a lot of anxiety buzzing around. So if we can kind of clear that away, think of a sweeping brush with all the leaves, the thoughts are the leaves in autumn time, and just push them away at the start of the day, you can then just teach yourself to one central thought pattern that's going at a different vibration, which is a calmer. We mentioned the word stillness, that will allow you into stillness more frequently. And so what happens then is, let's go back to the earlier things like work, for example. The boss starts giving out, that's just the way he is or she is. You will react differently. So we mentioned, controlling your emotions earlier on. It won't be a cognitive thing. So you mightn't have to go, should I react here? Should I, so you don't have that thought process. Instead, your brain wave and your training, your brain actually changes. So you don't actually have to think, will I engage here in this argument? No, you just breathe. You breathe right through it. And if we look at a lot of, say, for example, we take arguments or when people are falling out or discussing, a lot of things are millisecond. People say things before they've even thought about it, really. And that's coming from their subconscious, because if they've been brought up badly, if they've had a lot of stress in life, it'll just come out of their mouths. And if we have 2 or 3 people, it's like a sudden argument. People say things, they don't forgive it. They then, tag person as that's their personality. I don't like that boss. He's not fair or whatever else. But if you can kind of be that calmer one, automatically trained by this free thing of meditation, then you get huge benefits. You'll be able to also see things in the bigger picture clearer. You'll be able to see opportunities, I mentioned innovation, and you'll be able to kind of just notice other people who are calmer as well. Calmness is the natural way of being. Look at a baby. The baby, just joyful. They laugh. They don't know damn all about life, but it doesn't matter. Look at a very old elderly person who has no regrets. Again, they should be joyful, right? They should be reminiscent, fine, but joyful and wise. And so everything else in between is our lives as adults and young people. We are taking all those external stresses. We have this thing like meditation, which is proven so often to help us to change our brain chemistry and our brain waves in a more sustainable and permanent state. And just to go back to the very first thing you said about that, a lot of people, you're right, they find it very difficult to get into that space in the first place. So what I would say is that's the external buzz that's out there. It's all the time you're spending listening to other stuff, and you're in a brain state that's so beta, it's so energized. So we need to slow it down. So give yourself a chance. Don't try and jump into 10-minute meditation right now or 20-minute meditation tomorrow, something like that. Just try to get yourself into a quiet room, adequate temperature, get sitting on a chair. Just try to sit still and concentrate on your breath. Just do that for now. See where it takes you a few weeks later, and then start kind of going into more formal types of meditation practice.
There's a wonderful book. I recommend it to a lot of people by a gentleman named Victor Davich, Davich, called 8-Minute Meditation. And what he does is every week he takes people through a different type of meditation so that he's doing 2 things. He asks you for 8 minutes and he's introducing you to new techniques. And over the course of 6 or 8 weeks, he's building not only knowledge and experience, but a habit. So at the end of that period of time, hopefully you're going to have found one meditative technique that works for you, and you've built the habit of putting aside just 8 minutes. And you can expand that if you choose to. You don't have to. But I think that's a brilliant way, really, to approach something like meditation, because it's going to be a little bit different for almost everybody.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you're going into your core. So it's like the journey is within, right? We're so
absolutely
concerned about journeying here and there. And like with COVID, I need to get out of the house. I need to get out of my neighborhood. I need to get out of this country. And so there was a lot of travel in 2022. But the journey within is by far the greatest journey. And it's the best journey, because once you realize and understand yourself and your abilities and what's best for you, that's where inner joy comes from. That's where you can sustain. And like you say, 8 minutes, that's another thing that a lot of people go, well, I can't afford 10 minutes a day. I need to get more hours in the day. Nobody needs more hours in the day. What they need to do is do the right thing during the 24-hour period. And so we do know, obviously, you need X amount of hours for sleep, but there's so much other stuff we're doing. And even in the moment, we're not taking in the information, we're not communicating properly. Meditation and other mental practices will help with all of this. So 8 minutes is nothing. It's an investment into your time and your life now, but also into the future as well.
You mentioned the baby and an older person and the fact that it's possible to have joy. But I think you can have joy throughout your life. And I think to find joy and joy in the present moment, you have to be present. And that means you have to find stillness because I think joy comes from stillness. It doesn't come from activity or things.
Yeah, things. It's funny. I have a friend who's a medical doctor, and he's actually in Canada, and we spoke about this before. And the word stuff came up. He said that there's so many people coming into him in his practice. He's a GP, and not colds and flus and the regular stuff, but he said it ends up just being mental health issues. It's climbed so much in the last few years. And his synopsis and summary of it all was stuff. People just want more stuff. And what is that all for? And it's so true. Like, why do we need to be obsessed with things, stuff, the next thing, the next big product or consumerism that's out there? I mean, when again, the wise people that have all the things in the world, millionaires and billionaires, and that many of them that are good people, and there are, okay, there's bad ones too, but there's also good people out there that have these things and stuff, and they can afford anything, and they will tell you, like you mentioned, isolation. Some of them are very isolated because so many people in the world just want their money. So the thing is, it's the joy of just like the simple things in life, like they say, it's so true. Just being with another person of the same interest, or that will trust you, or you can trust them. Surrounding yourself again with the right people. Just because, by the way, a person, let's say, take financially, just because somebody doesn't have money and you don't have money and you want money, it doesn't mean to say you can't be with them insofar as a lot of things. If they're being productive, if they too have a potential vision in their lives or an aim, strategy, if they're doing the right things, if they're not complaining and playing the victim all of the time, they're a good person to be around too. You can bounce off each other. So, like, it's about finding the bottom and then going to the top with regard to everything, finding what's in yourself and whatever your constellation of natural attributes are, feed them, work on your weaknesses, and just watch yourself grow.
Society wants to measure everything. He who dies with the most toys wins, and that type of mentality. And it doesn't bring peace. It doesn't bring
Yeah.
joy. Ultimately, it's shallow. Is there any chance that we're going to wake up as a society and realize that happiness does lie within?
It's going to be very interesting over the next couple of years. I really do think, because you're right. I mean, it's interesting how, and the research hasn't really completely, said this, but it's very interesting how we as human beings, especially in the Western world, there's a lot more anxiety around, a lot more depression. And if we look at it, a lot of that has happened in the last 10 to 20 odd years. And guess what? That's also the time of the internet and the explosion of social media. And if we look at, say, certain platforms that are very, very popular, and we all know the names of them, a lot of it is putting up pictures of stuff, being here, being there, looking better. We see a growth also in plastic surgery, for example, in the same time frame. Now, the reason why the research hasn't caught up with is because it's moving so fast, and we don't know the outcomes of so much of the anxieties and depressions that we have. Because now it's like there's a growing shoots of these anxieties and depressions, and there's new conditions almost being labeled concurrently as we're moving. So, but the bottom line is, are people joyful or still, or are they actually bringing themselves into this long-term just gloom? And it seems that many people are not, like we said, joyful. They're not still. And there's certainly, you can't just switch that on, by the way. You have to live it, right? And so, and again, the research is there that a lot of 95% of what's happening with conditions and medical um, illnesses, physically even, are coming from lifestyle conditions. So what we're feeding ourselves, obviously food wise, drink wise, with regard to our minds, what we're looking at, and what that then makes us, the actions to do are vital, because that then makes us the person we are and the person other people perceive us to be. So my prediction, I believe, I mean, look, we've got 8 billion people in the world. If we look at the internet and we just take it, hey, this internet has changed things. I think we're at a really big twist in the road now coming up. So we've had Web 1, essentially, where you've got everybody has a website, or you need to have a website. That was like in the early 90s to around 2010. Web 2 then came along with social media, what I just mentioned, the goods and the bads of it. Now we're going towards this phase of Web 3. And I think all of that is going to be really, really important with regard to how that's shaped and how that helps and hinders people, because everybody in the developing world, say for example in Africa, and that are getting the internet, and it will be going around the world, it will be, exploding these places very soon. That's going to then, they're watching the Western world, and they're watching how we're behaving and what we're doing and what we're putting up online and how we're living our lives. And so if we're all leading ourselves into dismay and gloom, what's the point? So I think there's going to be a responsibility on the creators in these next few years in Web3 and what we do actively in it. That's really, really important. Now, obviously, a lot of people just create and do things online and sell things online to make money. But it has to come to a way where there's corporate responsibility as well. And we look at global warming and all that's happening there. And that's probably going to be like really catapulted in the next 5 years. And the law, I believe there'll be laws brought in with regard to, and a lot of people might see them as restrictive laws. But no, these are ways that we have to live now. We must live. And so I think Web3 will be kind of linked in with all of that. And so that means how we create what we do is really, really important for not just ourselves, but for humanity as well, and for just that joyfulness that we speak of.
In your book, you wrote, "The world is won by those who let it go." What do you mean by that?
Could you tell me what page that was on?
No, I can't. I
The
didn't
book
write
here
that
at
down.
hand, I could just look it up.
But no,
Yeah.
I thought it was a very profound statement. Really, that the way I took it was that all this grasping for things and stuff and control is an illusion. And it's not until you really let go of these illusions that you find yourself and you find your way and you find joy.
I mean, again, if we look at the context of the book, say sport, right, professional sport, and that, one of the things that is the outcome of the book with regard to all the research that I've done, all these top professional athletes across the MLB, NFL, NBA, Olympic champions, Premier League champions, and European Cup champions, Rugby World Cup champions, and so on and so forth. The thing about it that comes out of it is, these are competitors, these are winners. These are people that if they win 10 times, they want to win 11, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15. When they retire, it doesn't matter. That's the way they are, right? So it's not about the medals or the trophies. It's about doing your best with regard to every sinew of your being that you have on a given time. And if you lose, you regret, and you were so angry with yourself, you're frustrated because you know you should have done better. It seems to be about, with regard to all of that, it's, again, things, stuff. These things don't matter. It doesn't matter if you don't have money right now. It really doesn't. It's your behavior. And it's how, if you're honest to yourself, like a thing like confidence, for example, confidence can be aligned with honesty. If you're honest to yourself, when you're on the starting blocks of, be it a race in 5 years' time, something that you've worked to or you've earned or done the training for, or if you're at a big meeting for work or promotion or getting a bank loan or whatever else, or an investor, or a relationship that you've had really a lot of problems or health problems, and now you're healthy and you want to do all these other things. when the time of pressure comes, you can say to yourself, I did the right thing even when the worst things were happening. Now, can everybody say that in this life? No, they can't. So that's where regrets come when we're older. That's where the calmness and the joyfulness that we should have after earning our life's keep should be there. But yet people have regrets. And I would even go as far to say is that we will find out that regrets cause medical conditions. I bet that will come up in the future, because I 100% know that what's in our brains and our minds are linked to our bodies in every facet in every way. So if we sort out what's upstairs, i.e. then in my book, The Gym Upstairs, once we do that, everything else will follow. It might take some time. You might get everything at the same time, relationship, good health and money and whatever else at the same time. But you get onto one track of one of those things, for example, like we said, be with the right people, and everything else will follow.
Conor, where can people reach you?
Yeah, you can get in touch, and please reach out if you just want to be redirected. My name is Dr. Conor Hogan. My website is Doc Conor, DocConor.com, or CONOR at DocConor.com, or any of the social medias. You can check me out on most of them. And the book is called Gym Upstairs, and it's on Amazon.
Thank you for listening. I hope you'll support this podcast by becoming a Bump 2 subscriber. Buy us a cup of coffee. It's your support that makes this podcast and website possible. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life's path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life.